Welcome to this week's episode of the Python People podcast. And this week we are very lucky indeed to be joined by none other than Matleen Makko Boronad. I say that right, Matleen?
That is correct. Hey, that is me, Matleen Makko Boronad, but just Matleen.
Glad I got it right. So Matleen, for those people out there that haven't had the pleasure of making your acquaintance as of yet, you are the data science manager for Deliveroo, and we got chatting, I suppose, over the last few weeks, and thought it would be a good idea for us to get together and record a podcast. And in this episode, we thought it'd be good to have a little chat about a topic that I know is quite close to your heart from conversations that we've had. And that is the value of diversity in data science. Okay, and to sort of frame what I mean by that, how do we go about building and managing diverse teams? Both from a kind of gender, race, education, background point of view, but also in terms of actual data science skills as well. What's diversity mean, and what's the value in doing that? So I'll start by asking, diversity, I guess, I'm going to play devil's advocate to a more or less a degree. I think in society, it's become a bit of a buzzword, rightly or wrongly. And a lot of companies kind of think they do stuff around diversity and kind of have a diverse or a diversity policy, I guess, when it kind of comes to how they structure their businesses and growing their teams. But if truth be told, I don't think many actually do. So, why do you personally feel it's so important to create teams, diverse teams within businesses?
Firstly, thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me talk about that topic. It is indeed quite close to me and my heart, and maybe a little bit of background as to at which point did I really fundamentally started valuing diversity in general, and not just in a workplace, but coincides was probably around 4 or 5 years ago, when I had lived in London for about 4 or 5 years. And there was a very specific day, when I just realized that having colleagues and friends around me who are from all sorts of different backgrounds, very different to my own, I just get to learn so much, not only in a workplace, but also about the cultures and the countries people are from, or the backgrounds they are from. And I almost equated to, at that point, to traveling the world, having those conversations with people around me in London. I learned so much about what their background is, so I actually get to know the culture of a different country, or a place, or culture, really. So firstly, so that's a question as to why I just value diversity so much in my life. In the workplace, there's multitude of studies, but just I'm mostly speaking from my own experience. Diversity fosters creativity, and obviously my career is in data science, which is maybe not considered such a creative field in many ways, because creativity is equated to arts and music, but data science really, and the more I am in it, I recognize how much creativity is very important, data science, but in businesses overall, fostering therefore diversity, which in itself enables creativity, which enables learning from one another, just really makes people do better work, in terms of considering all angles of any problem that we are here to solve, but also you create a really collaborative environment whereby people are not feeling like they're constantly competing with each other, which drives up engagement in a company, and ultimately employee satisfaction. And I'm a firm believer that people happy in their jobs will do a better job. But then, there is also a very pragmatic reason to why I think diversity is important in a workplace. There is that famously from McKinsey a couple of years ago, or maybe last year, that having innovation comes from having diverse and diverse teams. And when I talk about diversity, I really mean all angles of diversity. It's gender, cultural, ethnic background, educational background, or social background for that matter. Just having a mix of people together tends to lead to better outcomes in life and in work.
Yeah, I think that's some really, really solid points there. And I think diversity as a subject, in reality, in companies like London, I think the great thing about London, it is a kind of a melting pot of lots of different cultures, backgrounds, and thankfully I think there are quite a lot of pioneering companies that are really waking up and recognizing the beauty of kind of diversity. But I guess for other companies, and I've had conversations, I won't sort of name names, but I've had conversations with clients in the past where they're quite almost prescriptive, I guess, about the kind of blueprint of the person that they feel is going to fit well in their business, because they feel that their company has a real kind of culture, and it's sort of it's almost a badge of honor to be an employee of that business, and this kind of person fits in this business. And how do you allow for maintaining what is potentially a company culture, but also opening up those parameters to maybe taking a bit of a risk on someone that's outside of the kind of the normal blueprint that you would look for? What characteristics would you flex upon versus those that you kind of need to see in somebody to fit within the business? Where do you sort of sit on that?
I've certainly thought a lot about that, and I guess my relatively frank and blunt answer here is that if diversity isn't baked into company culture, then the culture probably needs to change. But that's a a very current, very, very new way of a lot of companies to think about this. I do understand the point that you are really raising, which is how do you hire people that would be a good cultural company fit, but might be very different from the people you have in the company. And really, I guess my first sort of comment applies here is that creating diversity in itself needs to be the aim. It is not about the background of the person or the cultural ethnical gender of the person that makes them not be a company fit, as long as they, in my opinion, and if that's the case, then I stand by my statement that the culture does need to change. So really the problem is not about worrying about, for me personally, taking a risk on someone who doesn't fit the very typical profile of someone in the company right now, but actually creating by bringing in people from different backgrounds, you create diversity in the company, which then becomes the company culture. That's a bit of a no answer to, but it's turning the question a little bit on its head, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I fully get where you're coming from there. And I guess, the culture, a diverse group of people creates its own culture, doesn't it? And I guess, one person can't always be prescriptive over the culture of the business, because, as a business grows and expands, you probably end up having kind of lots of little different cultures, I guess, which is, in different teams, which is always really nice. But I know a lot of kind of CEOs and kind of sort of the board level that I speak to, they do have a vision, I guess, for, what it is to be an employee of that business, and kind of, try and find people that align with that culture. I think it definitely, that there are areas where they probably need to wake up to the fact that, just getting cookie cutter same people over and over again, okay, it isn't doing that. It's not allowing for that kind of, you're really kind of limiting yourself, I guess, to, like you say, certainly the levels of collaboration and creativity you can have from looking at a problem from, different angles with people from different experiences and different backgrounds, different walks of life. And I can see within data science how that would be extremely useful, because data science is a very innovative field. It is about looking at a problem from a different angle. And I can really see how having all those different perspectives, all those different viewpoints from kind of a very diverse team can, create a much more, positive and innovative kind of result. Absolutely. So how do you, where do you sit on the world of diversity within data science specifically? What sort of examples have you had in the past where you found it genuinely very useful having a diverse team from a backgrounds point of view, but also I guess probably like a skill set point of view as well?
Yeah, so I think you got kind of mentioned the core point here, is that in data science essentially is about problem solving with data, and the more the area evolves and the more I get to learn about what's out there in the world of data science, it becomes really clear that almost any problem, depending slightly on the circumstances, can be solved with very many different approaches based on what people know and are familiar with. So in my team and in my team, in my wider team, and the people I work with, we have people with research background, or they are machine learning engineers, or we have econometricians, statisticians, business analysts, and they would all be able to solve a problem, but they would all have a different approach to this. And bringing all these people together with their, I guess, first gut feeling approach to the problem, and then discussing what is actually least effort for most output in that specific circumstance, and what is the best solution, can really only be achieved when you bring together people who would fundamentally have a different approach because of what they've studied at university, because of where they worked before, because of the types of work they've done before. And really this is where the value specifically in data science really is, on top of the fact that you come up with more creative solutions, discuss how different people would approach the problem. But from a skill set perspective, you can approach a problem as a causal inference problem, or you can approach a problem as a let's do something quick and dirty in cheat sheets. So it depends on the context, and you kind of need different angles and viewpoints of people to come together to come up with the best solution. And really in data science, I can't really think of very many examples in my life where a data scientist who was hired to maybe do something very specific, come up with a neural network algorithm to solve a specific problem or build a recommendation system, doesn't have to do a little bit of data engineering, a little bit of quick and dirty analysis, an understanding of experimentation. And ideally, if you mature a company, you want these experts in those different areas to come together to help each other and create division of labor. So there are pieces of work that in a less mature company, a data scientist would just do everything, right? They would do the data engineering, and they would do the algorithms building, and they would do the analysis of experiments and the design of experiments, and then they would come up with something for the exec team to make a decision of about. But when you mature a company, you want those people who are experts in those different areas to come together and work collaboratively together. So starting to build this diversity of skills as early as possible. At first, finding the diversity of skill within the single individuals that you have in the team, and then starting to bolt on. I think it's really key for any data science team, depending on independent of how, I guess, specialized the team is. You kind of need a little bit of everything to do the best work and to do the most impactful work, and that also gets heard by the company and really the wider world. I don't think that a very narrow skill set within data science will lead to best outcomes. And the bigger your team organization grows, the more specialized people you can have, but they should really work really well together. So you take one person with a multitude of skills and expand it into 10 people with all of their skill sets, but it has to work together as a unit. So that's why I think where it really matters, and that division of labor is really important, because in the long run, having someone who has really extensive background in maybe econometrics, who can really understand causal relationships between things, if you get them to spend too much time in data engineering, writing a ton of SQL or producing slide decks for the execs, they will really not enjoy that, and this is not the best value for money. So you have to have someone they can lean on and freely and openly and collaboratively lean on to do the adjacent bits of their core work. So that's where that's why, and where I think it's really valuable to have diverse data science teams, and that diversity of skills to some extent is an output of diversity of backgrounds and people.
Absolutely. And I guess as a manager, it's probably something it does raise a really interesting conversation within recruitment, because when you're growing your team and you're interviewing for people and people walking through the door, I suppose in your mind, you probably have, right, I know a machine learning researcher should have XYZ skills, and this person coming through the door has got ABC skills. And I guess in your mind, your job as an interviewer is to assess suitability to the role based on this person walking through the door, without any kind of discrimination or prejudice or whatever. As a manager, though, growing your team, where do you draw the line, and how do you know sometimes to take a gamble on somebody that might not be ticking every single one of those boxes, but you just you think this person's going to add value in other areas? Where do you kind of draw that line without sort of stepping into the world of where I think diversity, going back to what I was saying right at the beginning, has become a bit of a buzzword for certain companies, where it's almost like they feel like it's diversity for the sake of diversity, and actually, all right, we have to have this diverse team, so let's just hire this person even though they're not right for the role. And then you're kind of falling into the lines of kind of positive discrimination, which I think is even well, not even worse, but it's just as bad. It's obviously very condescending, and how do you balance that up, and where do you sort of see the areas that you'll be prepared to flex on a little bit, bringing someone into the team even if they don't check every single one of those boxes?
And I think that goes back to a little bit to your question around company culture, in that it is actually true that companies have culture. Some are more hierarchical, for example, and everything is there's a lot of bureaucracy in companies. The bigger it is, the more bureaucracy it is. The pace is slightly different. Other companies, those that are growing, are very fast paced. You have to be on your feet all the time, think on your feet. Things change all the time, and these are characteristics that I do important. That is completely independent of what people's backgrounds are, but you have to be able to, on the company culture side and team culture side, you need to be able to evaluate these efficiently, and they are more of a characteristic of a very specific individual, as opposed to relating to their cultural, ethnical, gender background, cultural background, ethical background, and gender. They are very, very specific traits of specific people, and some will thrive in certain environments and others won't, and that is quite important to assess, because bringing someone in to a team that is, say, incredibly fast paced, things change on a daily basis, and you have very little time to spend to build something that's perfect as a model, or spend a very prolonged period of time really, really focusing on your piece of work, and really polishing it up. Those people will struggle and suffer and will not enjoy the fast-paced environment of having to answer a million questions and doing a little pieces here and there. So that assessment is really important from a company culture point of view, but also from a team culture point of view. So depending on the specific, I guess, job I'm in or company I'm in, this is something I do assess about people, trying to sort of recognize what the biggest challenges of the company are, and the biggest traits that make people thrive, um, that do vary company by company, and define the company culture and hiring according to this. But then to your specific question around, I'm looking for a specific profile of a person with XYZ skills, and another person comes in who's great and is meeting a lot of what I would expect a great, I don't know, data scientist in my team to be, with specific skill sets. Then for me, I normally think about a good collaboration with someone else in the team or with the rest of the team, whether those skills that the person is bringing in would help someone else to upskill into a different area, and create the collaboration whereby maybe someone else in the team already has some of the skills that I'm looking for, but you create opportunities for people to upskill each other, learn from each other, and that's I guess crucial when you're taking this risk of someone who doesn't exactly meet what you're looking for, thinking about what is the additional thing that they can bring to the team, and whether there is enough support in the rest of the team for the things that we do need to get done, that it will get done. So get a bit creative when it comes to team engineering. But sometimes it is, and to your point around, and that's something that I feel strongly about as well. Hiring diversity for the sake of diversity is pretty tricky, in that just doing it without thinking those things through as to what value it will bring to the team, and how to actually then foster a great environment when you have diversity, is kind of a failure from the beginning. And I feel like I have been in a situation where I was hired because I'm a woman in data science, and there are very few women in data science, when I don't think the role was right for me, but company needed diversity, and I've kind of called it out that I don't think that the role is quite right for me, or is not what I'm looking for. And it was sold to me, and it really was a failure, and it was somewhat patronizing. But importantly, and secondly, hiring diversity for the sake of diversity in itself is not bad, but companies need to be ready to then enable those people to also succeed. In that, if I'm brought into a company because I'm a woman, for example, when it's really male heavy company, for example, and maybe they overlooked the fact that I might actually all the criteria for the role. I then need to be fundamentally supported in being able to succeed in that role, because otherwise it's a wasted effort for everybody. If I don't actually do what I'm supposed to do in the role, if I'm not supported in the way that I should be, given that I didn't actually meet all the requirements of the role, and that's where it falls apart, right? A lot of companies over the last couple of years, I think, have really tried to hire for diversity, but failed to then make people who have been hired, to bring more diversity in, which in itself is noble, to actually succeed. And you still end up with this, this funnel, just worse as you climb through the management ladder. It's just it doesn't work, because we don't have companies that then look after the diversity, if that makes sense. So we've put effort into hiring, but that's as far as it goes, and that's really bad for everybody. The people being hired, company morale, and the company itself. It's not a cost-effective thing to cost-effective way to run your business, or efficient, really.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the businesses that are doing this whole diversity for the sake of diversity thing, I truly believe it won't work out longer term for those types of businesses, because like you said, actually getting the people on board, hiring the people, that's just the first piece of the jigsaw. After that point, it's about how well, you quite rightly say, how well does the team collaborate, how well do they communicate, and what's the kind of culture of the business from that point moving forward. Is the right kind of framework in place to actually to get the best out of people. And also totally agree. I think it's a great point about, you know, the great thing about diverse teams is everybody drawing upon a different skill set, where by way of collaborating, you can actually simultaneously upskill everybody in the team in other areas they haven't necessarily had that exposure to. Whereas, you know, teams where everyone's siloed in one particular level of, you know, vertical expertise, everyone's just sharing that same knowledge round and round, and, you know, they're not growing and they're not developing. So, you know, it's I guess life in general, isn't it? It's always about broadening your horizons, learning new things. And I think diverse teams are a great way to allow that to happen relatively organically, if you've got the kind of right manager in place, the right leader, the right kind of framework that allows that to happen within a business. So yeah, I think some really good points there. And yeah, playing devil's advocate with regards to diversity versus same kind of skill set, do you think a diverse team's always better than teams where people come from a similar kind of background? Are there any kind of examples or any kind of situations where you feel actually having a team of people that aren't necessarily from all different kind of backgrounds, aren't necessarily from a different kind of walk of life or technical expertise, do you think there's ever a situation where they work better?
Well, I think that there are industries and areas within each industry where you do kind of need a set of people with similar traits, backgrounds, and education, really, for that matter. I guess I can't think of a situation where I've fundamentally thought it's better. But maybe, you know, like I think there is something that, you know, pops to people's mind when you talk about diverse teams, is that, well, but you're gonna see, or, you know, like they're just so different from each other and they just don't agree because one person thinks of this is the right way of doing things and the other person thinks this is the right way of doing things. I really generally think that this is a personality thing, and if anything, having people exactly from the same background, it gets so competitive because it's like, well, I had that MBA and I had that MBA, I know a little bit better than you do, as opposed to being, well, you studied something completely different, or you come from a completely different background, let me hear you out. So I think that clashes thing is if anything, I think it happens more in less diverse teams. That said, having background in finance or banking, there are areas in which having people with, I don't know, I might say something a bit odd here, but there are certain skill sets and backgrounds for that are necessary for some jobs.
Yeah.
Having, you know, sales teams need kind of a similar personality, and often they come from relatively similar backgrounds, and I mean sales in banking, brokerage, for example. That is not to say that we shouldn't look into fostering more diversity, or I don't know, accountants. You need an accountancy certification to really be a decent accountant, right? That is not to say that you shouldn't have diversity in cultural, ethnical, or gender diversity in the team, but you kind of need that set of like education for this team to be efficient. You can't really have an accountant. I mean, you can have people with various degrees from the background, but there needs to be some commonality, you know, to efficiently do something in some other areas. So whilst I don't have any experience whereby I would say that having a less diverse team is a good thing, I can in some areas it might really be important. And actually more so recently than ever before, they're like people with MBAs, they seem to be able to communicate in ways which I don't know, a data scientist can't communicate in, which is really businessy. It's really, and you kind of, you know, in not to say that everybody should have an MBA in a business team, but there are, you know, certain things, especially in the communication, that maybe would clash in certain teams where communication is the key real skill in the team. So not sure how valuable what I just said is, but in general, diversity all the way. But in some cases, you know, some commonality in background might really be helpful.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I think often you can get sort of two bogged down into the semantics of diversity and should we be diverse in every type of situation and whatever. And I spoke to a CEO once that kind of distilled it down quite well for me, and it made a lot of sense. Where it's like diversity is actually quite a simple thing. It's basically about not judging somebody when they walk into the room about whether you're going to give them the job or not. Interview them fairly, and I need them to have two things. One, the right skills to do the job that I'm asking them to do, and two, the right attitude. And whether they've come from this country, that country, this background, that background, or whatever, if I feel they can do the job I'm asking them to do, and probably even more importantly, if they're missing a few of the things on the skills section, but they've got the right attitude and I feel that they're going to really bring something to the business, then I'll hire anybody. And I think that was a really kind of quite nice, succinct way of putting it. It's not like we need to be diverse for the sake of being diverse. It's just about give everybody a chance. If you think they can do the job, great. If they can't do the job because they haven't quite had that experience or got those skills, but you feel that they can make up for that potential lack of skills if they've got the right attitude to go along with it, then I think they're the kind of businesses, they're the kind of teams that can make magical things happen if you you surround yourself with those types of people. So yeah, that's just something I thought when you were speaking there was quite relevant. So I guess lastly then I'd like to sort of finish by asking you a question, and it's a pretty loaded question, so forgive me, but what can companies do you think be doing more of at the moment that are maybe aware they're not wholly diverse and they genuinely do want to sort of make a push towards creating more diversity in their workplace? What are some sort of simple things or that you could share based on your experiences that could sort of help them moving forward?
I'm not sure that there are simple answers to this, but what I've observed in my career is firstly recognizing the value in diversity and in creating diversity and shortcomings, and actually looking yourself in the mirror and recognizing that we might not be as diverse as we really should be, and to follow from there, really recognize hidden biases. So it's really good to think exactly in those terms that you just described, that you look for someone who has the baseline of skills and the motivation and the attitude. And over again I've seen that the motivation and the attitude and a baseline of skills and in data science, ability to do quick maths is all that really matters. Most jobs you learn on the job as long as you have the attitude for it. And most jobs are learnable on the job. There are only a handful of professions for which you need to have a degree, with doctors and lawyers and
yeah, well, that's one you probably don't want people learning on the job.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't have that. But for everything else, and that almost includes data science to some extent, you have to have some baseline of skills. But there is a lot of hidden bias in our hiring and in our culture, right? We think that we are evaluating people on merit only, when really our daily interactions, unfortunately, are still ridden with biases, gender or cultural, racial biases, really. And starting to really talk about these in the company openly, honestly, and recognizing these. That's something that I've brought up in my workplace as well. In that, look at myself in the mirror, being a woman and being not English, although very white. I recognize that I occasionally suffer from biases working against me, but I also have my own biases in certain ways, because I've grown up in, I live in a culture that is unfortunately full of bias from hundreds of years of history, and they are subtle biases. They're not obvious. And also they are gender related sometimes, and it's really, really critical for companies to really start openly talking about this, and creating maybe an idea that I think is excellent for a company that really takes it seriously is creating forums whereby people can anonymously submit situations from their workplace or from their life whereby they felt like they had biases working against them, or they were being biased, and actually bringing those stories to life, and because they're so subtle sometimes people don't recognize them. As a woman, I speak to a lot of women in my company, and they tell me stories about, oh my god, I felt this bias working against me. The person that was creating that bias against someone else had no idea. They had the best intentions. So actually bringing those into life and into light, and making that topic commonplace, I think it's really important. Now, that is not actually a simple thing to do, right? This is a very conscious decision that a company has to make about, I'm taking this topic seriously, because it is very easy to appoint someone in the company whose job it is to ensure diversity and ensuring diverse hiring pipelines and good training, interview training, management training that gets rid of that is designed to get rid of any biases in hiring and management, but just bringing the topic out in the open, alongside getting rid of biases in hiring and management and appointing a dedicated person is I think the only way really forward. Like, it needs to become a commonplace for us to recognize when we are not entirely unbiased, and this is really difficult for anyone in this world to get rid of all the biases that they have and are surrounded by in their daily life. So I don't think that there are simple answers here. I think it's the transparency of bringing it to light as much as it might at first. Solving any problem is a little bit painful at first, but eventually you fundamentally transform how you think about that topic, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really great summary. I think people are unconsciously biased as much as they are consciously biased as well, and I think it often is just, I think it's just bringing awareness to the situation, isn't it? And that's why I really like having conversations like this, because I think it's just like with a lot of topics in life, really, the more awareness you can kind of bring to something, the more dialogue it sort of created around it, the more openness I guess there is to do something about it. But also I totally agree with you, it's not an easy challenge, an easy problem to solve, because as creatures we inherently learn about the world through our experiences, and we build our stereotypes, rightly or wrongly, through our previous experiences. I guess a lot of it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if we're only fed certain stimulus from a previously biased generation, then we then can automatically inherit those kind of biases as well, and then pass those on. So I think you're totally right, there's such amount of huge conscious and unconscious biases that exist in the world today. But yeah, I'm sure we will get there slowly but surely, and keep sort of chipping away. And but no, I mean, genuinely, thank you very much for your time today, Matleen. I think it's been a really great chat, and you've shared some phenomenal perspectives on this particular subject. So much appreciated. And yeah, we'll keep in touch and keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, take care. Speak soon.
Speak soon. Bye bye.
Bye.